about a former chief rabbi of the United Kingdom. He was an Ashkenazic chief rabbi, respectively, Rabbi Joseph Herman Hertz, CH. He was a chief rabbi, I think, between the years 1913 until he passed away in the year 1946. Very staggering 33 years in of itself, which would actually encompass 2 world wars and unfortunately the horrors of the Holocaust at that point in time. He was a British rabbi and a biblical scholar, and he was actually born on the 25th of September 1872. He passed away on the 14th of January 1946 respectively. So we're at the time period, let's say the month of his Hilula, the last month in of itself. So we like to usually record the videos of great rabbis at time period of their Hilula, but happened to, I think, been a few weeks ago, if I'm not mistaken. Now, he was actually born in Rebrin, if I'm not mistaken, which is a part of the Kingdom of Hungary. Well, I think it's actually presently a village of Zamplinska in the Slovak Republic, if I'm not mistaken. Now, in the year 1872, I think, if I'm not mistaken, he emigrated to New York City in 1884, and he was educated at the New York City College, the Columbia University. He'd get a PhD, and the Jewish Theological Seminary of America. He was rabbi over there and was the seminary's first graduate. Now, I have to point out over here, I believe the JTS, the Jewish Theological Seminary, at that stage in time was, and in its first years, was an Orthodox seminary in of its own right, and then will branch off into conservative. So at the time when he was learning there, he was, it was an Orthodox seminary at that point in time. His first ministerial position would be in New York, in Syracuse, also I think known as a Temple Adat Yeshurun at that point in time. Now it's interesting, he'd have a very well-travelled career. He would actually, I think in the year 1898, he would go on to move to Transvaal in South Africa, to the Witwatersrand Old Hebrew Congregation in Johannesburg. He would stay there, I think, until the year 1911. He would be close to 40 years of age. There'll be attempts, I think, by the president over there at that point in time, someone named Paul Kruger, in 1999, I think there was a, let's say, to bring him away from that position because he had pro-British sympathies and advocated, let's say, various different removal of religious disabilities of Jews and Catholics in South Africa, if I'm not mistaken, at that point in time. That's just reading Wikipedia as a source over here. He was also a professor of philosophy at the Transvaal University College. Well, this was also known as the University of the Witwatersrand. I think this was between the years 1906 to 1908. He would actually go on to return from South Africa he would return to New York, actually, to the Orach Chaim congregation in the year 1911. So that's very, very interesting. So before he would become the chief rabbi of the United Kingdom, you could see he had a very, very well decorated and busy career in of its own right. So it's actually interesting. We're going to see that he will precede Rabbi Herman Adler as a chief rabbi. He will eventually be succeeded by Rabbi Israel Brody at a later stage in time. So very, very interesting enough. Okay, so let's continue speaking over there. I think it was in 1913 he was elected the chief rabbi of the United Kingdom, of the United Hebrew Congregations of the British Empire. Interesting enough. And I think he was up against, there was another rabbi that would flirt with the position, someone named Diane Moses Hyamson, if I'm not mistaken. But he would be elected at the end, and very, very interesting. I think there was other candidates at that point in time, or associated, including Rabbi Bernard Drachman, if I'm not mistaken. The Rabbi Hertz would hold the post until he died, so that was a very, very impressive 33 years. Remember, the chief rabbi role in itself is usually a long-term position. His tenure, there was obviously it was a time period of robust debates all around various different communities, let's just say, in of its own. And I think the actual Dictionary of National Biography will actually give him a title or a description as a combative conservative. And he was known for, let's just say, favouring resolving like robust debates with calm discussion, especially if all other methods would not succeed in of itself. And I think, along with many rabbinic, let's say, positions, like say, when people are chief rabbis, not everyone will always see the chief rabbi role. Every different dominion will actually unanimously hold this person in of its own right. So that's something we have to point out also. He was a chief rabbi of the group of synagogues known as the United Hebrew Congregations of the British Empire, obviously naturally led by the United Synagogue. And I think at that point in time, it's reported over, just reading Wikipedia here, a minority of new immigrants who had arrived since the 1880s did not necessarily confirm with this at that point in time. It's very interesting. He was very persuasive in of itself, and he had great influence on various other sectors, as I say. He was very, very charismatic, and would have a close connection, I think, with famous Rabbi Cheskel Abramsky to become the head of the London Bedin, the Jewish court of London, respectively. So that's very, very interesting. He had strong support for Zionism, especially in the 1920s and in the 1930s, we have to point out. And I think that was a window of time when many Jewish people were against Zionism. And let's just say that there was that fear that it would lead to accusations against the Jewish community of divided loyalty. Rabbi Hertz obviously was, just like many other chief rabbis, was strongly opposed to reform and liberal Judaism. And but at the same time, he would not allow real personal animosities to take place. And he would have association also with Jews of other faith at the same time, but he did not. He was, let's just say, he was against it. He was an Orthodox Jewish person all the way. He was very well known, obviously, to get this position, to be a chief rabbi of the United Kingdom, eloquent oratory, for example. He had lucid writing, description, and sincerity. Would get a great amount of grandiose respect among the majority of the British Jews and many outside the Jewish community in of itself, so from the other faiths also. His commentary on the Torah is actually very, very famous and is used in vast majority of Orthodox synagogues and various Jewish homes, especially in the Great Britain area country in of itself. And very interesting. I think, interesting enough, that one of the main editors of articles, someone named Rabbi Nosson Sherman, would maintain and state that Rabbi Hertz was a great man, courageous rabbi in of itself, and much can be said about it, and really testifies within regards to his greatness. Now, it's actually Rabbi Hertz obviously will vigorously denounce the horror of the Holocaust, just like many of the other rabbis, and horrors actually occurred at that point in time, and he would actually be the chief rabbi at that window of time, we have to point out. So he actually just describes it. It's very important we educate the next generation within regards to the horrors of what actually took place between 1939 to 1945, describing the events. They snatched infants from their mother's arms and used them as footballs, bouncing and kicking them around the arena. This was quoted in Wikipedia. Robert Hertz, I think, was opposed, reported over here from Wikipedia, to the kinder transport if it meant Jewish refugee children would be raised in homes of Gentiles. And Robert Hertz saw the British war effort in the noblest of terms. I think at that point in time he would wish Prime Minister Winston Churchill a happy 75th birthday towards the end of 1944 with a message: but for your wisdom and courage, there would have been a Vichy, England, lying prostrate before an all-powerful Satanism that spelled slavery to Western peoples, death to Israel, and night to the sacred heritage of man. That's what he was quoted from saying over here. That's something that we have to point out. He was an ex officio president of the Jews College and an acting principal 1939 to 1945. He was also the president of the Jewish Historical Society of England between 1922 to 1923. And after his period over there was over, he would continue to preside over lectures at the society, including a lecture by then Chief Rabbi of Cologne, Germany, someone named Rabbi Dr. Adolf Kober, in the year 1937. He was also a president of the Conference of Anglo-Jewish Preachers. He was on the board of governors of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and the chairman of the governing body of its Institute of Jewish Studies. So he was decorated with various different roles. He was also vice president of a wide variety of various different, not just Jewish bodies, but also non-Jewish bodies, including the Anglo-Jewish Association, the London Hospital, the League of Nations Union, the National Council of Public Morals, and King George's Fund for Sailors. I think it was in 1942. At that point in time, there was an Archbishop of Canterbury, someone named William Temple. Rabbi Hertz founded the Council of Christians and Jews to combat anti-Jewish bigotry. Now, it's actually interesting. His daughter was named Rebbetzin Judith. She got married to Rabbi Solomon Schonfeld, if I'm not mistaken. And famously, he would leave a famous great-granddaughter, an economist named Norina Hertz, has to be reported over. Let's speak about the period of the imperial tour. Now, from 1920 to 1921, he was around 7-8 years into his premiership of the chief rabbinate over there. Rabbi Hertz became the first chief rabbi to undertake, let's say, a pastoral tour of the British Empire. He would arrive at the idea of such a tour after reading exports reported over of the Prince of Wales' successful tour of Canada following the First World War, and he would decide to do something similar, to visit small Jewish communities in the British Dominions, obviously later known as the British Commonwealth. Rabbi Hertz' imperial tour took him to 40,000 miles and to 42 Jewish communities over 11 months in South Africa, in Rhodesia, in Australia, in New Zealand, in Fiji and Canada. So in those time periods, it wasn't as easy to access various parts of the world just as it is now. And reported over, he lectured extensively on the Torah, on the Bible, to Jewish people and non-Jewish people, and sought to raise £1 million for Jewish education, which is a staggering feat, let's just say. He would begin his tour in South Africa, which had a Jewish population of as many as 66,000 people. That would actually start on 27th of October 1920. He would travel throughout the country over a period of 3 months. He covered 5,000 miles by railway, including stops in several smaller communities as well, especially in Cape Town, Johannesburg, area called Pretoria also. And he was even greeted by the Prime Minister at the time, Jan Smuts. And following his trips to Bulawayo, I think in neighbouring Rhodesia, he would then proceed to Australia with 20,000 Jews, where he would deliver lectures in 20 communities. Now it's interesting, his travels then took him to New Zealand with 2,500 Jewish people over there. He would stop in Fiji, where a few Jewish families were living, before arriving eventually in Canada. And I think with, at that point in time, 125,000 Jews over there. Now, come on the July the 4th, 1921, he would do a 6-week tour that took him across Western Canada, with stops including Vancouver and Calgary, Edmonton, Saskatoon, Regina, Winnipeg. And he would deliver over various sermons, especially 11 famous sermons, and speaking at 13 meetings as well, as receptions with 4 lieutenant governors, received by 7 mayors, and visiting 3 provincial premiers in of itself. So that's very, very interesting. We have to point out, anyone tuning in live, we're exploring a few of the highlights of Chief Rabbi of United Kingdom, Rabbi Hertz, over here on this special edition over here. So very, very interesting. Yeah, so we're just talking about, I think also, if I'm not mistaken, carry out many engagements in large Jewish centres of Toronto, and in what was Canada's largest Jewish community of 40,000 people, in Montreal, which is very much highlighted, let's just say, by an address to 2,000 children in a park. And he would continue to Halifax in Nova Scotia, and would conclude, I think, with a Bible lecture in St. John's in New Brunswick, if I'm not mistaken, and eventually depart Canada on April 16th, 1921. He would actually return to England, and he would actually famously quoted saying, "I had preached love and loyalty to the empire wherever I went, and sown the seeds of the Jewish idealism and spirituality in all the far-off places I visited." And he was granted, actually, interestingly enough, a private audience with the famous King George V at Buckingham Palace in November to discuss and speak about his visit also. There was calendar reform. I think in the 1920s, Rabbi Hertz successfully organised international opposition to a proposed calendar reform. The League of Nations was considering a calendar amendment, the world calendar, such that a given date would fall on the same day of the week every year. And this required, let's just say, that one day every year, 2 in leap years, is not any day of the week but a world day. Thus, once or twice a year, there would be 8 days rather than the 7 between consecutive Saturdays. Thus, the Jewish Sabbath, which must occur every, let's just say, 7th day, would be on a different weekday each year. So that would be obviously very much problematic. So he foresaw that and would, protest against this. The same would apply to the Christian Sabbath also, he recognized. So Rabbi Hertz realized that this would cause problems not just for Jews, but also for Christians in observing their Sabbath. So he would mobilize at that point in time worldwide religious opposition to defeat this proposal. So you can see he was a worldwide figure and will have huge influence in all different faiths in of its own right. He would be decorated with various honors. He was made actually a member of the Order of the Companions of Honor in 1943. He was also commander of the Order of Leopold II of Belgium, interesting enough, and actually received a Columbia University medal. There's also a memorial plaque on his former London home at the 103 Hamilton Terrace in Maida Vale was unrevealed back in the year 1996 on the 12th of March. Now, he was an author also, especially the Affirmations of Judaism, which was a collection of sermons which was very well regarded. He published a further 3 volumes of sermons, addresses and studies. Another book of his was a book of Jewish thoughts in 1917. This was a selection of Jewish wisdom through the millennia and was very, very popular and ran to as many as 25 editions. The Battle of the Sabbath of Geneva, which is an account for his obviously opposing the calendar reform. Now, most famously, Rabbi Hertz edited a Hebrew-English edition of the Jewish prayer book of Siddur. This was in 1946. Many of the United synagogues, especially all across the United Kingdom, would have this famous Siddur. He would also contribute to the Jewish Encyclopedia and Encyclopedia of Britannia. Then there was a famous Hertz Chumash, the Bible. It was edited. Hertz edited a significant commentary on the Torah between 1929 to 1936. It was a 1-volume edition in 1937, and it was published as a Pentateuch and the Haftorot, and popularly known as the Hertz Chumash. The classic Hebrew-English edition of the 5 books of Moses, we have to point out, with corresponding Haftorot, respectively, and obviously used in many synagogues and classrooms all throughout the English-speaking world, the United Kingdom, in America, and various other places. The work, through its commentary and essays, is noted, let's just say, for its stance against higher criticism. That's just quoting Wikipedia over here. It is also referenced to as a Hertz Pentateuch, and it includes the following features: extensive essays on, the perceived conflict between science and religion, reported over here, comparisons of Torah laws and those in the code of the Hammurabi, and comments from the source reference to Christian sources, if I'm not mistaken, including the authorized version, if I'm not mistaken, of King James, if I'm not mistaken, over there. So that's what's also pointed out, just quoting from Wikipedia here. So I have to see the sources just from these quotations also, I have to point out. And I think includes views of the most important, let's say, Jewish commentators, including Rabbi Abraham ibn Ezra, Rashi, the famous Rashi, the Ramban, the Radak, the Sforno, and the Ralbag also. The actual writing, which produced 5 volumes, was done by 4 other people. But Rabbi Hertz recast the material into his own style, if I'm not mistaken. Now, reported over when the 5 volumes were combined in a single volume and published by the Sonsino Press, the revised version translation, but not the non-Jewish commentaries were replaced with the 1917 Jewish Publication Society, if I'm not mistaken, also. So, but I think there was other light editations also. That's something that very much you have to point out over here. So we did state out from the onset he would learn originally in the JTS. Remember, that stage in time, Jewish Theological Seminary was an Orthodox seminary, if I'm not mistaken. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, there was I think the school itself opened in the year 1854. It was a new rabbinical school, and I think there was also a very similar one in Breslau, if I'm not mistaken. We mentioned Bernard Drachman, who was a key Frankel student and was one of the founders of the JTS. You remember Bernard Drachman, who was flirting with the position also to become the chief rabbi in 1913, was also associated with that, and very much a Breslau rabbinical seminary, and he would very much state that it was an Orthodox seminary over there, if I'm not mistaken. So, but I think there was others that would point out the JTS, when it was actually founded in 1886. There were 2 Orthodox rabbis that were heading it, especially Rabbi Sabato Moraes, who was an Orthodox Sephardic rabbi, and Rabbi Henry Pereira Mendes also were them, and they were very much connected to Sephardic congregations of Philadelphia and New York. And really, their initial goal of the JTS, let's just say, was to preserve the knowledge and practice of historical Judaism. And I think originally this seminary, where Rabbi Hertz was one of the early students over there, was mostly connected to the Spanish-Portuguese synagogue, New York's oldest city's congregation. And Rabbi Sabato Morris, we have to point out, was a staunch Orthodox rabbi, and was, I think, the rabbi of Philadelphia's congregation Mikveh Yisrael, was against reformers at that point in time. But I think eventually, unfortunately, this seminary itself would, unfortunately, the conservative will actually take over. So I think that Rabbi Sabbatia Morias era, really, when it was there, and when Rabbi Hertz was also a student there, was between 1886 1897, we have to point out over there. And I think one of the tools of his original group used to create this new rabbinical school, the JTS, was an association which was founded by Rabbi Morias as its president in 1886 as an Orthodox institution to combat the hegemony of the Reform movement. The school was also hosted, as I said before, by Rabbi Henry Pereira Mendes. He was the rabbi of the famous congregation She'erit Yisrael, which was a sister synagogue to Mikveh Israel in of itself. And they were joined by Rabbi Alexander Kuchhout and Bernard Grachman, both of whom received rabbinic ordination, if I'm not mistaken, at Rabbi Frankel's Breslau seminary, which seemingly was Orthodox also. And they would originally shape the curriculum and philosophy of the school. And I think in 1894, Rabbi Joseph Hertz would go on to become was actually learning there, maybe got his smicha there at that point in time. He would eventually become the chief Rabbi of United Kingdom, who we were speaking about before. And Rabbi Morias was a president of the JTS of America until he died in 1897. And then eventually, I think in the very, very early 1900s, the conservative will slowly take over this seminary in of its own right. So just pointing that out as a thing. Obviously, the congregation Mikveh Yisrael we've spoken about on various occasions before. It's a famous synagogue in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, which is associated to this originally Sephardic Orthodox Jewish synagogue. And I think one of the most famous synagogues in the United States of America. I think, especially during that time period of JTS, it was in the 117th 7th Street, especially between the years 1860 to 1909, if I'm not mistaken. And it was not just Rabbi Sabbatia Morias. Also, there was Rabbi Henry Samuel Morias. There was a Hebrew school also attached to this place in of its own right, and so on and so forth. Very interesting. But let's go back now to the Rabbi Hertz, who was a chief rabbi of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. There were other chief rabbis also of the United Kingdom, we have to point out. Now, it's interesting. We have to point out that for a window of time, there were no Jews. The Jewish people were expelled from the United Kingdom. Rabbi Jacob Ben Aaron Sasportas will become the first, let's say, chief rabbi of England after the expulsion between 1664 to 1665. But what's not so much well known is there were chief rabbis also before there was expulsion of the Jews from the United Kingdom. The first one, I think, was someone named Rabbi Jacob of London, who was appointed in the year 1199. Then it was Joseph of London between 1217 to 1237. Just reading this over from Wikipedia. Then there was Aaron of York in the year 1237. Someone named Elias Le Esquel was appointed in 1937. I'm not too sure for how long. Then Rabbi Hagin Phil Moss was in the year 1257 appointed. And Rabbi Hagin Phil Duras was appointed in 1281. I think at that point in time with the favor of Eleanor of Provence, if I'm not mistaken. So very, very interesting. We're going to come back in 1 minute, friends, and continue exploring who were the chief rabbis over here of the United Kingdom. We're going to just read over who were both the Sephardic chief rabbis and the Ashkenazic chief rabbis. So we're just going to take a short 1 minute break, and we're back in 1 minute, friends. Okay. You too. Okay, shalom everyone. Thanks for being patient over here. So we're exploring the life within regards to Rabbi Hertz, who was a chief rabbi of the United Kingdom between 1911 to 1946. So who were the other chief rabbis of the United Kingdom? We mentioned the earlier ones in of its own right. Let's, as we stated before, the Spanish-Portuguese Jewish community, or Hacham, or senior rabbis, would Rabbi Jacob ben Aaron support us between 1664 to 1665 will become to have the premiership of the United Kingdom. Let's explore some of the leaders of the Spanish-Portuguese Jewish community. And so we know that the Sephardi Jews in the United Kingdom obviously are in current time periods are mainly members of independent synagogues, and there's no, let's say, just reading over a title from Wikipedia, there is no single rabbi recognized by them as chief rabbi. The Spanish-Portuguese community consists of several synagogues, charities, a Bet Din, and a Kashrut authority, and these are under the leadership of an ecclesiastical head, so they really are chief rabbi in a form, right? Historically, the individual will fulfill his role, recognized as senior rabbi of Anglo Jewry, being the leader of the oldest Jewish community in the country. The senior rabbi was originally given the title Hacham, meaning a wise one, and since 1918, only Rabbi Solomon Gaon was given this title. The official title of the holder of this office is now the senior rabbi of the Spanish-Portuguese Sephardi community in the United Kingdom. So who were the Rabbi Jacob ben Aaron Sosportas will become the first, let's say, chief or head rabbi of the United Kingdom went after the expulsion between 1664 to 1665. That was then followed by Rabbi Yeshua da Silva. He would become the SMP head between 1670 to 1679. Then Rabbi Jacob ben Dana was between 1681 to 1684. We're going to go through the list of the UK chief rabbis of Commonwealth in 2 minutes' time, after we go through this specific list of the SMP ones. Then Rabbi Solomon Elon between 1689 to 1700. They'll be followed by Rabbi David Nieto between 1701 to 1728. Rabbi Isaac Nieto would continue the Nieto premiership between 1732 to 1740, if I'm not mistaken. That would then be followed by Rabbi Moshe Gomez de Mosquito between 1744 to 1751, and that will be followed by Rabbi Moshe Cohen de Azebodo between 1761 to 1784. Then the famous Rabbi Raphael Meldola was the head rabbi between 1806 and 1828. Then Rabbi Benjamin Artom between 1866 and 1879. I'm not sure what happened in the years between Rabbi Meldola and Rabbi Artom. That I'm not too sure if there was a specific equivalent leader or not. Then Rabbi Moses Gaster was between the years 1887 to 1918. And Rabbi Shem Tov Gagin between 1920 to 1953. He was then, at that point in time, I think there was a ecclesiastical chief of Spanish-Portuguese Jewish congregation, and there wasn't registered a Chacham. The Rabbi Solomon Gaon, seemingly between 1949 to 1995, would be the leader. Obviously, I think still Rabbi Shem Tov Gagin would have a premiership role to 1953, so they would maybe merge it together or work correspondingly. And Rabbi Abraham Levy was between 1995 to 2012 officially the communal rabbi and spiritual head of the SMP Jews congregation, and didn't have necessarily the Chacham in of itself. Rabbi Joseph Herman from 2013 was elected senior rabbi. I think he left the position in 2026, and now I think it's Rabbi Elituv, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember his first name also, but he was just crowned as a leader just very, very recently in previous weeks, if I'm not mistaken also, so that's something much of the point there. So who were Ashkenazic chief rabbis now since when they returned? Obviously Rabbi Jacob Sosportas and several rabbis will be. It wasn't until 1696 when Rabbi Judah Loa ben Abraham Ephraim Asher Anshel will be the chief rabbi from 1696 to 1700. Then it was Aaron the scribe of Dublin between 1700 to 1704. They'll be followed by Rabbi Aaron Hart for a staggering 52 years between 1704 to 1756 will be chief rabbi. Then they'll be followed by Rabbi Hart Lyon between 1758 to 1764. Rabbi David Tavelli Schiff between 1765 to 1791. Rabbi Solomon Herschel between 1802 to 1842, Rabbi Nathan Marcus Adler between 1845 to 1891. They'll be followed by Rabbi Herman Adler for 20 years between 1891 to 1911. Rabbi, obviously, who we're speaking about today, Rabbi Joseph Herman Hertz between 1913 to 1946. Rabbi Israel Brody will be for 17 years between 1948 to 1965. Rabbi Emanuel Jacobovitz between 1966 and 1991. He was actually knighted, if I'm not mistaken, in 1981. I was given a life peer in 1988. Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs between 1991 to 2013. Obviously, he was knighted in the year 2005 and was given a life peer in 2009. And currently, Rabbi Ephraim Mervis, Chief Rabbi, from 2013 to the present time period. He was actually given the knighthood in the year 2023. We have to point out within regards to him. So we're speaking over here about Rabbi Hertz, over here, very, very well decorated rabbi of his time. And he really was seen to strike a balance between tradition and development of commitment, classic beliefs, and of the halachic system, you can say, especially in his earliest days. And I think it was a position of orthodoxy after the Second World War, his position, and really defended traditional Judaism, if I'm not mistaken, all throughout, and was very much was a staunch critic of Reform Judaism. And yeah, it's very, very interesting. So he as you see, he was very, very well travelled. He'd go all across the world. He would give sermons all over the world. It was very much documented over that point in time. I think it was based in Maida Vale. That was one thing to point out within regards to that. He would use his official powers and influence to suppress non-orthodox ideas. Rabbi Hertz did. He refused to allow, reported over, that I'm reading this from the Jewish Ideas website now, pulpit exchanges between his ministers and those of Reform and liberal congregations. And if I'm not mistaken, he asked the BBC not to give them airtime to broadcast, reported over. Robert Hertz exerted discipline, reported over, inside the United Synagogue, if I'm not mistaken. And very, very interesting. So much has been reported within regards to him. So I think he would be legal advisor to various kings across the world also. And you can see he was... He would, I think, in a later stage, yeah. So he would, but at the same time, he would keep good relations with everybody. Also, he had a reputation as, let's say, he would try and do positive actions in of itself. And you can see he was really a rabbi that had global influence, especially within regards to the calendar in of its own right. That's something that we have to point out. Yeah, so I think also when Rabbi Abraham Isaac Cook, who would go on to become chief rabbi of Israel, of the Jerusalem, was in London in 1915. I think there was let's just say, correspondence also with Rabbi Hertz at that point in time, if I'm not mistaken. So that's another interesting thing. And very interesting. He was very, very strict within. He was really keeping with traditions with regards to his community in of itself. So that's something that we have to point out. Yeah, and he would seek agreements also with other prominent rabbis himself. It's actually, we did state on our outset that he was obviously a very committed Zionist, Rabbi Hertz was, especially since the 1890s in himself. And I think in the year 1917, he would play his part in obtaining the Balfour Declaration, very interesting enough, promising a Jewish homeland in Palestine. And before the British government issued the declaration, they wanted to ensure that the Jewish people wanted to receive it, seeing as its purpose was to rally Jewish support for the Allies. They asked 8 leading British Jews their opinion, and there was significant, I think, vocal elite opposition to Zionism at that point in time in Anglo-Jewry, which Rabbi Hertz had publicly contradicted, reported over. Rabbi Hertz was one of the 5 who urged the government to issue the declaration, making a decisive contribution, reported over. During the years of the British Mandate, Rabbi Hertz was determined to hold authorities to account for the welfare of the Jewish people and the Jewish rights in Palestine, and was active in the governance of the Hebrew University, attempting to maintain a traditional outlook in the Bible and Talmud departments and secure jobs for European refugees. We have to point out also over there. So that's we talked all about the calendar beforehand, how Rabbi Hertz managed to go against it, let's just say, at points in time, and would have various different worldwide support within regards to this. And we spoke about his famous pastoral tour of the British Empire, where he would travel around all over the places in aid to raise £1 million for Jewish education in of itself. So you can see he was really full on a world leader of world Jewry in of itself. So that's something that we very much have to point out. And he really sought to make a strong London bet in of its own right, to bring, as we said before, Rabbi Yechezkel Abramsky in appointment as head rabbi at that point in time, and really to improve kashrut, kosher laws within regards to the country and the United Kingdom in of its own right. And we did speak about the famous Hertz Pentateuch and Haftorah, which was part of a wider project of promoting intelligent traditional Judaism also at that point in time. That was one of the goals within regards to that in of its own right. That's something and very much used. So he passed away on January the 14th, 1946. I think he was just under 74 years of age at the time period when he passed away, but it's actually his position, the rabbinate itself, was 52 years, and he was a chief rabbi of the United Kingdom for a staggering 33 years, and he achieved a huge amount at that point in time, bridging old and the new, fostered modern, non-obscurantistic but authentic traditional Judaism, also upholding halacha, and knew how to work within it to meet the needs of the community in itself, and will bring very much over here the fruits of Jewish learning to a huge audience through sermons, lectures, and books. He fought for Jewish dignity, which is important, and Jewish rights, and including for the Jewish state in of itself in the Jewish land. He passed away 2 years before the formation of Medinat Israel, we have to point out also. And he was a forceful, but he believed that he had the sacred mission to uphold the truths of his faith and to maintain allegiance to it in the modern world. And it's actually interesting, in his induction sermon as a chief rabbi, Rabbi Hertz called for loyalty in life, if I'm not mistaken, and death to the Torah and tradition of, sorry, this is just a mistake over here. And he really called for loyalty in life, and really promotion within regards to Torah, Judaism, and all that he believed in, let's just say, in itself. And very, very interesting. So he became really a great rabbi. Rabbi Hertz did, and so much can be stated about him. There's a Rabbi Benjamin J. Elton actually in the Jewish Ideas website, actually gives an excellent article. I think he currently is a rabbi of the Great Synagogue in Sydney, which is the mother congregation of Australian Jewry. He gives a very excellent article with regards to Rabbi Joseph Herman Hertz, who was a chief rabbi of the United Kingdom over here. Now, friends, everyone tuning in live, we are a community where we are exploring the history with regards to great rabbis of yesteryear. Now, we've already recorded videos about 1,500 rabbis. Yesteryear, we're trying to, let's say, formulate an encyclopedia of great rabbis. We've spoken about many of the famous chief rabbis of the United Kingdom. We mostly spoke about the Sephardic chief rabbis, but we're going to try and delve now more into the Ashkenazic chief rabbis also. So that's hence what we're doing at the moment here today. We happen to be speaking about the famous Rabbi Hertz, one of the famous commentators of various different Jewish books over here today. So if any of you descend from any great rabbis we happen to be speaking about, please don't hesitate to contact me. I'd love to hear more information. Friends, the community over here, we don't just explain videos of rabbis of yesteryear. We are also recording videos of various countries across the world, exploring various different Jewish histories, what actually happened all across the world in different countries in its own right. That's another series we're doing. We also tour all over Israel. We like to explore Israel, all different places, different streets, archaeologies, and so on and so forth. We do that, and we've got so much fantastic content over here on this channel. So please, everyone, join our community. With that note, wishing you all a fantastic day. Don't forget to subscribe, and the blessings here from Israel. Thanks for watching.